Welcome, everyone. This is Work Made Human. I'm Nichole Mendez, Director of Talent Acquisition at BAM.
And I'm Jill Veglin, head of BAM.
I love
Not
that.
the head of BAM. And I'm Jill Veglin, head of people at BAM. And with us today, coming from South London, is Abadesi Osunsade, founder and CEO of HustleCrew and co-host of the Techish podcast.
Thanks for having me. So excited.
Another role as well, right? So you're wearing many hats.
Yeah, exactly. I have to always be wearing at least 3 hats at any one time. It's like the rule of all immigrant children, I think. One job is never enough.
Well, thanks to Ramel. We had the pleasure of looking at your LinkedIn, checking out your podcast, Instagram. So we're so thankful that you're here. A lot of the conversations that you bring to the light are essentially conversations Jill and I are having all the time anyway. And that's the reason for this podcast, right? Is being able to have those really just human conversations and important conversations about people in the workplace. So to kick things off, storytelling as a PR agency is so core to everything we do at BAM. And we know that every team has a very human story to tell. So as we said, you wear a lot of roles, wear a lot of hats in many roles. So tell us more. What story are you essentially telling with your work?
Yeah, I really love this question. I think we're living in an attention economy, and it's really difficult for us to decide on any given day what to give our attention to. So storytelling is important because it's the way that we can cut through the noise and make authentic connections. And I think we also, rightly or wrongly, define ourselves through the stories we tell. I'm very conscious that the time I'll have on earth is actually quite short. So I'm always thinking about the impact that I want to make while I'm here and the stories that will be told about me when I'm gone. And one of the things that I think I care a lot about now is the work that I do within the tech industry to ensure that it is building a fairer future, not a future that is, more exploitative, more unequal, perpetuating the mistakes of previous generations. So whether that's through the inclusion advocacy that I do, whether that's through the conversations I start online, whether that's through my podcast, I dream of a future where women and other historically marginalized groups just have more power, because I think the stories we pay the most attention to are of the people that have the most power to tell them or who have the loudest voice. And so, I feel like the story I tell about what I'm doing now is, I'm trying to make a really positive impact as far as leveling the playing field and also making sure that tech ultimately serves public good and doesn't necessarily just fill already deep pockets, which feels like the default a lot of the time.
Yeah. Whew. Okay. Well, speaking of tech and big companies, you've worked in big companies and you've built your own thing. And just as listening to you talk, the question I'm asking was initially about support, but maybe I want to shift a bit to inclusion. So you can go either way here. But what do big companies get wrong about inclusion and what do they get right?
I think one thing that big companies do well is codify their values and try to get everyone on the same page about why the company exists, who the company serves, what its goals are. But I think what it gets wrong is that big picture, high level, what gets the shareholders excited stuff doesn't always trickle down to an individual's role, whether that role is customer success, sales, office management, you name it. They're not looking at the shareholder reports. They're not looking at the P&L. They're just looking at their to-do list. They're just looking at their email inbox. They're just listening to a conversation on the other side of the phone. So I think what big companies often get wrong, especially from a leadership perspective, is like forgetting what motivates individuals in a team and what makes them excited to show up for work, be that brand ambassador, post on LinkedIn about how exciting their role is, show up to, company events, wear that company swag with pride. They fail to translate that big picture to the day in, day out of a role. And I think inclusion is a big part of that, right? So, I remember a time where I worked for a company that was, part of a VC company. And at the time, a lot of women felt that there was no flexibility in our working hours. We were expected to work from early morning to late at night, expected to work weekends, expected to be at very boozy industry events. Where is the space to build a relationship? Where's the space to one day start a family? And I'll never forget the day that the CEO went, oh, I've got a really exciting announcement to make to the women here. I know there have been concerns about flexibility, culture, ways of working, and we'll now be paying you to freeze your eggs, which we hope, buys you guys some more time to figure that all out. And women were just like, that is not what we asked for. Okay. We asked for flexible working. We asked for, a less sexist culture. We asked for this. And instead you're just like encouraging us to defer all of these choices that we'd like to make. And I remember like speaking to the CEO after, and he was just like, I really thought people would like be happier when I announced that. And I was just like, you're so off the mark.
Essentially, it's like, oh, I heard you. We've got you this. Don't worry.
I've heard you, and I'm giving you something else.
And this is where who was in the room when this decision was made? How many women, how many mothers, how many women wanting to be mothers did you talk to about this?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm gonna guess 0.
Yeah. Well, this also makes me want to lead into belonging, and we're still talking about DEI. It is not a bad word to us, diversity, equity, inclusion, and often you hear belonging added on, DEIB. And having lived across different places and cultures, how has that shaped what belonging feels like at work?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think for me it's just about you don't know what you don't know. And it's so easy to make an assumption about someone when all you've seen about them is one stereotype on TV or something you heard a problematic uncle say or a joke your parents made. And you're like, yeah, that must be true, right? Because the people around me have said that and believed it. And, I lived in, Maryland until I was 8. So my whole life was Montgomery County public school system. And I had, nothing else. And then suddenly, thanks to my dad's job, I was in international school in Tanzania, and there were people from Europe and Asia and Africa and all these other parts of the world that I'd only ever heard of or maybe hadn't even heard of. And, you go to friends' houses after school to play games, and you're exposed to different food, you're exposed to different culture, you're exposed to different languages, and you suddenly realize, oh, what I thought was the way things were done is just the way things are done in my house. And there's all these other hundreds of houses all over the world where like some people say grace before a meal, some people don't, some people eat fish, some people don't, whatever it is. And yeah, I think for me, that opportunity to see all these different experiences allowed me to understand that, we shouldn't just give our respect or give our attention to the people that feel the most similar to us or the people that feel the most aligned with us. In a way, we can allow our ignorance to make us feel superior, or we can allow that ignorance to be a reminder that, we really need to have more empathy and we really have to have more compassion. And I always say to my team, assumptions are dangerous. How many times have you worked in a company where it's like, oh, why did that person get the promotion? Oh, well, I just assumed she didn't want it. Well, why did you assume that? Why did you assume, she didn't want the promotion? Or, why is this person picked to lead the pitch? Oh, well, look at him. He's got what it takes. And it's like, but why? Assumptions are so dangerous. And I think the less exposed you are to different cultures and different backgrounds, the easier it is to make those dangerous assumptions.
Agree. I mean, assumptions they lead us to creating just completely false stories about people. We just make up stories and decide they're true based on these assumptions we've made. So I like that. Assumptions are dangerous. They are. Shifting gears, I joke that I'm a reformed people pleaser. I'm proud of that fact. It's something that's really hard to be a reformed people pleaser.
That.
Yeah, to work on boundaries. And that's, I think, hard for so many of us to set boundaries, especially in work, especially in high performance work cultures.
Yeah.
So what is something you do now that the old version of you would have felt guilty about?
I think it's just putting myself first, and even when there's deadlines looming, and being what I would call lazy, but which to someone else is just like normal or productive, because I am such a people pleaser, like you said, like such a middle child overachiever here. Like, look at me, someone please pay me attention. And it's interesting because I was recently invited back to my university to speak at graduation, and I was amazed at how every single prize, like best dissertation, best student, went to a woman. And doing the work that I've done at HustleCrew, addressing salary inequities, inequities in job titles and roles and promotions and positions of power, I was amazed to think 10 years from now, are these women winning the prizes going to be paid the same as the guys in their class who weren't? Are they going to be in the positions of power that the guys in their class, who didn't win these prizes were? And, the data tells us no. The data tells us we do really, really well in school because the rules are clear. And also we can people please our professors. And then we enter the wild, wild west of the workplace, where every organization has its own unique culture, its own invisible rules that are always changing, its networks, its boys clubs. So yeah, I think something that I can do now to protect my boundaries that an older version of me would have felt guilty, ever felt bad about, was also like allowing myself to like fail in situations where I thought it was important to win, because we only ever have the information we have. We start a job all excited that it's going to be what we think it's going to be. Fast forward 6 months, a year, 2 years down the line, it might be a different management team. It might be a different leadership team. It might be a different culture. And suddenly that dream to climb the ladder, get that promotion, relocate to another office just doesn't feel right. Not for where we are then and there. So that's like another thing where I'd be like, I don't feel guilty for not fulfilling all the things I thought I would in this role. I give myself permission to take the information I have now and move on. Like, it's become a lot more easy for me to give past versions of myself grace, right? Like, I can almost break up myself into all these different dimensions and all these different versions and say the version who I am today is different to the version I was 6 months ago. 6 months ago, she did her best.
Yeah.
Kudos to her.
Beautiful.
Today, it's a new day, new information, act accordingly. 6 months from now, she might be disappointed in today. That's her problem. We'll deal with it at the time.
Yeah. What stands out to me is you're just less attached to the outcome, which I think is incredibly freeing when you're less attached to the outcome and you're just very present to what is and what you're getting in the moment, and then being willing to pivot and change your mind and go a different direction.
I think so. And I think people pleasing is linked to control in a weird way, right? Like, it doesn't feel like it because it's like, oh, I'm giving my agency to you. Like, I'm allowing you, person I'm pleasing, to determine whether I'll not be happy. But it's also rooted in this belief that I can control your happiness. Like, I can control how you feel about me based on what I do, based on what I say. And, probably a lot of people who are people pleasers are also, people that love to feel in control and do everything they can to feel in control, probably to their detriment and the detriment of people around them who kind of want to have a voice in things or kind of want to have a say in things. So I think another thing that I'm trying to do is like humble myself in what I can actually influence and what I can actually control, and kind of break that illusion a little bit. Like, this isn't all about me, and this certainly isn't everything that I can control. So, moment to moment, what can I own? What can I manage? And then also, like you said, not be too disheartened if the outcome doesn't pan out how I hope it will.
Yeah.
Are you listening in on my therapy session?
Yes, probably. I mean, there's definitely, we're all women here, probably a lot of like running themes as a result of living in patriarchy. We're also very ambitious women here. And let's face it, to play the game as an ambitious woman, it certainly doesn't work if you are overt with your intentions. Yeah. You gotta placate, because it's like, if they know how talented and bright and ambitious I am, they'll try and kill me or get rid of me. So it's like, we're all very used to hiding how competent we are, just so, someone else can feel a little bit like it was their idea or their plan.
Yeah, for real.
This reminds me a lot of the generational differences that we're seeing as well. So I started my career towards the tail end of the girl boss era, which was climb the ladder, work your ass off, the people pleasing, the hustle culture. But now we're seeing that there's a growing trend amongst Gen Z that's called conscious unbossing.
Yes.
That really is feeling like a rejection of that hustle culture and the hierarchical power. What do you think that shift is revealing about how younger workers are, in my opinion, not necessarily rejecting, but just refining ambition?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I feel like there's so many layers to this. I studied economics, so I always think about like what's the socioeconomic context in which this conversation is starting. And then, I'm also just a bit of a history nerd, and I think everyone's attitudes to work is very much shaped by the times in which they came of age, and the things that were happening to them and their parents and their support networks. And I think what you see with a lot of people in early careers is this really interesting situation where, their parents have had relatively, I mean, for the most part, broad strokes, careers. I'm thinking of London, savings. Some of them are still living at home. That's quite a unique situation. But then they're also probably still have living grandparents because people are living a lot older. And, you think of this sandwich generation of people who are, boomers, for lack of a better word, but they're kind of looking after their kids who are in their 20s, 30s, still at home, now looking after elderly parents who are moving back home or into care homes. And I think you have these early careers people going, what do I actually want out of life? Because I think my parents did quite well, but they look stressed AF and they're supposed to be retiring or / retired. So I think they're starting to feel a little bit like work is a con. Because it's like, even if you do it well and you get comfortable, you probably end up looking after your kids or end up looking after your parents or both. And then I think there's also the stories that we consume on social media where there are people who have become millionaires by, I don't know, setting supermarket challenges. Like, I still don't understand Mr. Beast. I don't understand that world. But, you've got people who are literally about to be on the rich list for just making content. So how do you define that as a career? What's the career path to be a content creator billionaire or a Twitch streamer or something like that? So the workplace has been completely deconstructed. The concept of a career path, a career ladder has been completely not just deconstructed, but also exposed and devalued. So a lot of people are just kind of thinking, I might just live at home as long as I can and then go traveling every now and then or hang out with my friends. Like, there's a lot of things that maybe also, brought shame before or stopped you from unlocking other goals don't exist anymore. Like, if there was a stigma around living at home that would stop you from getting into a romantic relationship, for example, or getting a partner, that's kind of removed if most people in your generation still live with their parents, right? I think there's that. And I just think to the point we had earlier about outcomes, I think people are starting to realize, do I really want to put my future in the hands of a manager or a boss who, one, may not respect me, two, might have actually quite problematic views when it comes to things like identity, capitalism, ownership. This is a very conscious and intelligent generation. They've had access to an incredible amount of information from day dot, right? I remember when we got a modem. I remember the dial-up sound. I was born in the 80s, so I remember that stuff. Whereas this generation is just like, you used to have to wait for a web page to load? What on earth? You didn't have ChatGPT on tap? It's like, no, my friends.
Or at your fingertips.
Yeah. I was like, I had an Encarta CD and that was the highlight of 1995.
Really?
So I think taking all these things in mind, there's probably something that leaders can learn about how you make a job, and more than just the job, a company culture, feel like something that can genuinely add value to a young adult's life. Like, it's not just about the role, it's about how they're contributing to something bigger in terms of environment, society, but it's also about their growth potential, right? Like, how do they grow in that role? Like, what skills can they gain? What experiences can they gain? What mentorship and coaching can they gain? So much messaging in the corporate world is output focused. Even a job description, you will be responsible for A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Maybe 5% of that job description, if that, is you'll also get these benefits. You'll also get that. Over time, that should completely change. It should be 50-50. It's 50% what we expect from you, 50% here's the pitch. Here's what we're selling you as an employee brand. Where is that? Where is that right now? It's absent.
Yeah. Curious, because I could talk to you all day. 2 minutes, give or take. Do you have a little bit over?
Yeah, go for it. I can run over.
So I have 2 more questions I'm going to try. Speaking of capitalism, Amazon has long been associated with this idea of hustle culture. And last month I was reading a book called Techish, which I highly recommend.
Ooh, okay.
Looks at the language of fanaticism and how language is basically used for power and influence within certain groups as well as cults. So in it, an Amazon employee was quoted, "Work came first, life came second, and then trying to find the balance between the two came last." So that's a hell of a lot to ask of your employees.
Yeah.
And fast forwarding over to present day 2026, we're seeing layoffs continue across industries, but especially at these tech giants. At the same time where companies are doubling down on productivity monitoring. So now there's supposedly an internal tip. I think you spoke about this on your podcast as well, for reporting underperformance, which is wild. So people telling on each other, so to speak. What does that combination signal, in your opinion, about how employees are being viewed right now?
I think the pendulum has swung. If we think of, the heady days of the pandemic, which feels like an insane sentence to say because it's like it was a horrific time, but at the same time, in terms of employee rights, companies were growing faster than they could hire, and it meant that employees could demand things. So when George Floyd was tragically murdered, when people were calling for justice for Black Lives Matter, there was a lot of power on the employee side where they could say, hey, if you don't do this, I'm leaving. And if your most talented developer, salesperson, manager says that, you're going to pay attention. But, the pendulum has swung the other way where companies are like, well, here's an AI revolution that's helping us, but also here's a reset because we're not growing as fast as we were when we were hiring. We overhired, but that's kind of awkward to say if you're a multi-billion-dollar company that should know better. So instead you say, it's AI's fault. And now you create this culture of scarcity and fear where it's like, hi, everyone, you're now fighting for jobs. So, stitch on each other. I think it says that when push comes to shove in a high growth, hyper capitalist work environment, people are reduced to a line on a spreadsheet. I think people are the product, right? Like there is no OpenAI, there is no Meta, there is no, you name it, Nike, whatever it might be, Apple, without people. Steve Jobs was a person with a vision. Steve Wozniak was a person who could build incredible things. And I think it's very easy when the decisions are made at that high level by people writing checks, by shareholders, whatever it is, to take the humanity out of it. But history shows us that is just such a big mistake. There's a reason why people are pushing to unionize. There's a reason why people are pushing for collective power. There's a reason why people are going back to the grassroots, because they are recognizing the power in people. And because it's not being recognized by employers and institutions, it's forcing people to accelerate that recognition amongst ourselves. And it's like, we don't actually need this company, because we can come together and show these companies how to treat us better. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens when the pendulum swings the other way again, back to employees having a greater voice, because it's inevitable. Like no period of time lasts forever. The only thing that's guaranteed is constant change. So yeah, I'm really interested in that. And then I think, as far as how to take this as an employee yourself, I speak from a position of incredible privilege, right? Like I'm an entrepreneur. I've worked at loads of companies. I'm incredibly well networked. I also have savings, right? So like if at any point work no longer serves me, I can stop without my life coming to, a crashing halt. I think there are many individuals out there who can't say the same thing. They have dependents, they have things going on. And what I say to those people is, you always have a choice, right? You can choose to continue working in a company that doesn't value and that doesn't respect you. Start building your exit strategy, start building your plan. Whatever it is, always remembering that you have some level of agency, even if that agency is delayed or deferred until you've saved a bit more, until the people around you who are dependent on you have more flexibility. That's fine, but that's still a choice. It's a deferred choice, but it's still a choice. But yeah, I don't see the layoff season that's been around for 4 years ending anytime soon. So what I would urge people and people who've been long-term laid off and long-term unemployed, remember what choices you do have. What can you do with the time you have? What options are out there? They might be your third tier, fourth tier, fifth tier options that you hoped you didn't have to explore, investigate, or look at, but you still have a choice. And remember that, because there are a lot of people in the world who don't have those choices. Most of the people that we're talking to, that we're listening to, are probably living in like democratic countries in the Western part of the world. I remember reading in Maya Angelou's book, I Know Why the Cage Bird sang, there was a time she was super depressed, super in a funk, and her uncle kind of said to her, go to your room and don't come out until you've written 20 things you're grateful for. And that process, redeemed her incredibly. So yes, it's a tough time for employees, but at the same time, for most of the parts of the world where we're speaking to, there is still stuff to be grateful for. Is that a weird thing to say? You know where I'm coming from.
Yeah, true. The former people pleasers and the people in leadership now knowing, what they had to go through, and it's our position in so many ways to speak and advocate for, right, everyone else, and just using those privileges that we were talking to. It's hard to
Absolutely.
Nichole, did you have, or are we ready to wrap? I know we actually have
so many more questions. I wanted to talk about the New York Times piece, but
please go for it. No, go for it. Let's do that one.
Sure. I pinged back at like that. We're going to be a little late, so yeah.
Okay, last question, because I also saw your comments. New York Times, as you know, ran a piece suggesting that women have ruined the workplace. And while it was written by a conservative columnist and not representative of an outlet as a whole, it certainly didn't make it less any disappointing that such a respected outlet with that visibility would allow for it. And you replied, or you commented on it, saying, "What strikes me is how predictable the pattern is. When women and other historically excluded groups push for fairness, the pushback often gets louder than the progress." So what responsibility do leaders and institutions have when the pushback shows up louder than the progress? Or maybe just what advice, piggybacking off of what we just talked about?
It's interesting because I think, we live in a world where women were burned at the stake for people believing they're witches, and the only evidence you needed was for her husband to say it.
Yeah.
Like, she's a witch. Oh, right, cool. We'll get the fire going. And so this story of like women ruin everything is so old. It's so tired. It's so dated, and it's just so interesting when you flip it around how sensitive men are. And I think it's just like we're almost too resilient of the story of us ruining everything. Oh, we ruined it. Yeah. No, we don't. And what I think is interesting is that if you actually look at the wider discourse about women in the workplace, whether that's McKinsey's Women in the Workplace report, whether that's, any woman leader that's kind of talking about it, if you look at books like Invisible Women, whatever it might be, what you're actually seeing is that the workplace has kind of ruined women in the sense that we were told, post World War II, after we got active in the workforce, after we kind of normalized having the same kinds of jobs as men in the office, this narrative started saying like, hey, women, don't give up being a homemaker. Just keep doing it while also climbing the corporate ladder. So it's almost like we've been tricked into doing it all. And the traditional gender roles sadly still apply, even though it's not in the 1950s. So if you think about things like emotional labor, which women disproportionately carry, not just in relationships, but also in the workplace because of how we're socialized. If you then look at things like weaponized incompetence, where men in the workplace literally say, oh, but you're so much better at organizing events, or you're so much better at doing the coffee run and sorting out the snacks. If you actually look at the evidence, you see that, over the long arc of time, the workplace has given us more work, just like home did. So it's like, oh my God. And I think, kind of going back to this idea of like unbossing, redefining ambition, redefining success, we're only really at the start of trying to truly understand what success on our own terms looks like. And that's going to be really disparate and diverse across all kinds of women. But I'm really, really excited for it. And then I think as far as, employers and like what they can do, I think if an employer is genuinely interested in supporting women at all stages of their career and at all stages of their life, to the point that we made at the beginning of the podcast, they need to listen to women. They need to ask women, and as many different types of women as possible, and be flexible. People are just like, oh, our women's policy is done and dusted. It's like, no, it should be a living, breathing thing that adapts, that flexes. Line managers should have flexibility to give the women that they are responsible for whatever it is that they need. Some women might, want to come back to work soon after having, some kind of caregiving challenge. Other women might want longer. Some women might want, a few health days to manage whatever they're going through. Some women might be happy to work through it. Who knows? Our bodies are so incredibly unique. So I think just waking up to that fact and waking up to that reality is important. Some people want to be a trad wife. Some people want to be a girl boss. Can't judge a book by its cover. So, just ask women, listen to women, and take it from there.
Ask and listen.
Ask and listen. Abadesi, it has been lovely getting to have you here today on Work Made Human. Everybody, this is Abadesi Osunsade, founder and CEO of HustleCrew and co-host of the Techish podcast, reminding us that people are the product. So Work Made Human, we're all about the people. This is the reminder. You cannot lose the humanity in people at work. It's the one thing that is going to keep work going is your people. So people are the product, and also the reminder that you always have a choice. That's a powerful reminder. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.